So as a kid growing up with a single mom, my grandma was like my person, right? Because my mom was young when she had me. My dad wasn't around. So I had no second parent. So my grandma kind of stepped in and became that person. But she was my person. I go to her about spiritual things. I went to her about relationship things, about money questions, just about everything. She was my person. And you can literally ask anyone in my family on any different occasion, and they can all tell you some way that my grandma stood out or highly impacted them. My grandma was amazing. To be honest, I kind of equate her to Mother Teresa. Unfortunately, last year I lost my grandma, and she died due to dementia and Alzheimer's. And so it was so crushing to me because my grandma was relatively young when she passed. She was her mid-70s. And so after losing her, obviously I went through the grieving process of like losing that person that I always touched base with, you know, wanting to pick up and call her, wanting to reach out. And so I took some time to really reflect on the impact that she had on my life. And I learned so much through this experience. First off, I learned that like I want to be sure that I'm leaving a legacy. But the biggest takeaway I had from losing my grandma is what I want to share with you today. So I understand that like life is short, and you hear people say that all the time, but I really got to see that with my grandmother's life. She was a stay-at-home mom for most of her adulthood because she had 6 children, and my grandfather made a very good, living for them. And so she stayed at home. When her children got older, she went on to go to work, and she worked for like a scholarship organization. Shortly after kind of starting there, she started to have some memory lapses and problems, and so she did an early retirement. Quickly into retirement, the dementia progressed really rapidly. She got sick, and then eventually she passed away. Now, it's taken me a lot to get to the point to even be able to talk about this without getting choked up, but I believe that there's a lesson in every experience that you go through, and knowing my grandma, she would want me to share this with you guys. And so from that experience, I started to kind of get really bitter when I started to reflect on her life. Like, she changed everyone's life, but did she ever have a chance to live? Like, she never really got to like travel, and she never got to do all these things. And to be honest, if my grandma was alive, I know that she would say she was really content, but it made me start to reflect on things that I'm doing today. And are these things that I would want to do? Are these things that I would be proud of? Or are these things that I would regret? And so I started to do some Googling, light research, Wikipedia-ing, if that's even a word. And I started to look up the top regrets of those who are dying. Like, what are their regrets? And I came up with 4 regrets that were like the top, that kept being like common themes that I saw amongst articles. And the first one was they wish that they had touched base or checked in on their loved ones more regularly. And so people that were on their deathbed were talking about how they wish that they followed up with friends or checked in on their loved ones more regularly, but life kind of got the best of them. And so they lost track of them. The second regret that they had was the courage to express themselves. They wished that they had more of an opportunity or more courage or self-confidence or self-esteem or whatever to express themselves like truly, but they felt sheltered. And so when they were on their deathbed, they wished that they had spoken out more about the things that mattered or made a bigger impact. I think about people like MLK or something like that who spoke out freely and was killed for that. But I know that he was proud of his ability to step out and be courageous and to be confident and to change the world ultimately. And so that was something that was also a common theme that I saw amongst people that were on their deathbed. The third theme that I saw was that they wished that they hadn't worked so hard. They wished that they had not overworked themselves and pushed their family to the side or exhausted themselves in their good years, like overworking and still kind of like sliding by in their years of retirement or until they got sick. They really just wished that they hadn't overworked themselves. And finally, the fourth one is that they wished that they lived a life true to themselves. This one hit me like a ton of bricks. How many times are we living a life that aligns with what society tells us we need to do or need to be? How many times are we living a life to make someone else happy or to make someone else not feel ashamed, or like we live our life for our parents, for social media, for our spouse, for our kids, for all these things. But when we're old or when we're sick or when it's our time, is that what we're going to be proud of? And so I started to take some time to reflect on choices that we make today that I think personally we regret years down the road. And that's what I want to discuss today. So I want you to think about the choices that you make daily, where you work, where you live, what you do, how you spend your time, how you spend your money. and think 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, or 60 years down the road. Are these choices that you'd be proud of? Are these choices that you're going to like? Or are these choices you're going to regret? I know one thing that I see a lot that I know majority of us will regret is keeping up with the Joneses. With social media being like all the rave, and we're on there and we see people getting married and driving luxury vehicles and traveling and having kids and living in these great houses, then we start to question like our value and our worth. Why aren't I married? Why aren't I living in this fancy house? Why aren't I living a life like that? Why can't I travel? Why aren't I happy? But the reality is people post what they want us to see. So of course they're going to post their highlight reels. That's what they want us to see. But they're not going to post that maybe they're in debt to go on that vacation. Or they're not going to post that they're unhappy in their relationship or abused in their relationship, right? They're not going to post that the luxury vehicle is actually a rental or whatever it may be. So we don't always see the full circle. But if we spend our valuable time focusing on keeping up with stories that we don't even know the whole truth about, I know that in the long run, that's something we will regret, because ultimately, and this kind of goes with the second point, spending money on things that don't matter. Ultimately, when you're laying on your deathbed, whether you're sick or of old age or whatever that is, when you look back, is that car going to keep you company? Is that house going to keep you company? Are all of those degrees even going to keep you warm? None of that is going to matter ultimately. And it goes back to the regrets of the elderly or the people that were dying that I looked into. And that is keeping up with loved ones, because that's what's going to matter. What impact you had, what legacy you left, who you stayed in touch with, your relationships. Those things are what matter most. And so it's important that we start to take time and really reflect on that. Another choice that we make today that I know long term we will regret is holding grudges or holding on to unforgiveness. There's an old saying that holding on to unforgiveness is like drinking poison expecting the other person to die. But so many of us walk around holding on to unforgiveness because we feel like it's protecting us. We feel like it's the safe thing to do. And I am a victim of that myself. I always felt like unforgiveness protected me from being hurt, and holding grudges protected me from being hurt. But here's the reality. You can set a boundary without being unforgiving. You can set a boundary without holding on to unforgiveness. You can set a boundary to protect yourself, your sanity, your mental health, your overall well-being, and your peace. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're holding on to grudges or unforgiveness. When you're holding on to grudges or unforgiveness, you're unable to move forward because it becomes a heavy weight. It becomes extra baggage that you're carrying. And eventually that impacts your overall well-being, not the other person's, because they eventually move on and move forward. And so it's important that we understand that it does not behoove anyone for us to hold on to those grudges and those, and that unforgiveness. And think about it, years down the road, will what you're mad at when you're 20 still matter when you're 80? Will what seemed so big at that time seem as important when you recognize how quick life goes? I highly doubt it. So it's important that we recognize for our own well-being and for our own sanity and our own peace that we let go of holding on to those grudges and we let go of holding on to unforgiveness. Finally, the last choice that I feel like we make on a regular basis that we would regret 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 plus years is being lazy and making excuses. How many times have you set out to accomplish a goal? You're like, yep, I'm going to write that book. Yep, I'm going to see a counselor. Yep, I'm going to buy a house. Yep, I'm going to start a business. But when it really comes down to it, you put it off to someday. Let me just be real with you. There is no such thing as someday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So you heard me say all the other 7 days, but there's no such thing as someday. And when we hold on waiting for everything to be perfect, all the stars to be aligned, all the money, all the support, that day will never come. And if that's what you're waiting for, you will miss the opportunity to reach your goal. And that is one thing that I can tell you for sure that you will regret. So I share all of these things with you guys because I want you to understand that life is short. If there's any lesson that I learned through the experience besides, missing my grandma and going through the grieving process, it's understanding how valuable our time is. Money can come, back and forth. You can lose money and you can make it. But time is a non-renewable resource. It's something that we will never get back. And so every moment we have to make that matter. One of the things that I love to do is I love to talk to the elderly. Like, I just think that there's so much wisdom. There's so much opportunity to learn from them. And that's probably honestly why I was super close to my grandma the way I was, in addition to her just being a big support person in my life. But recently I went to a conference and I was put into a small pod in a small group of 5 people. And of the 5 people, there was an 75-year-old man, about an 84 or 85-year-old man, and a 91-year-old woman. And it was the most impactful small group I have probably ever been in. And for the reason that they just opened up and shared so much wisdom and made me understand how important it is for me to accept who I am as a person and not try to fit in, right? And made me understand how important it is to tell your loved ones that you love them, tell your loved ones that you want to be around them, to have time with them and to make that time a priority. It made me remember how important my dreams and my goals and my visions are, and how important it is that I actually take action on those things. And so that's what I'm here to share with you. If there is anything, any decisions that you're making that you know in the future that you're going to regret, I challenge you to make shifts today. Start to make decisions today that your future self will thank you for. I'll chat with you guys next week.